And then because it's a music, it also gets your body moving. So instead of the training that those of you who are music teachers have been giving your vocal students to go put your little body right there in the hub of the piano, and okay, that the African is going to move around the stage. I tell the story of my graduation recital, in which I did the Chopin, that one. I didn't know I had done it, but I did. Sitting in the thing, I went, bum, 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 I just automatically, the body moved. It's just one of those things. So anyway, the song "Guide My Feet, Lord, While I Run This Race," right, is one of the spirituals that helped in organizing rhythm, in organizing work, but also lifted the spirit. So you look at the words, you realize that you are not here to be in vain, right? That with God's help, guiding your feet, right? Which is, guide my feet, Lord, while I run this race. Now I'm the lead, and you are going to do the response, so I'm starting you off. Guide my feet, Lord, while I run this race. Guide my feet, Lord, while I run this race. Guide my feet, Lord, while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. And then I improvise. I tell the story. Stand by me. Hold my hand. Keep me going, because I don't want to run this race in vain. History. Oh, am I supposed to change in perception? This is, yeah.
Here's what happens. When the slaves originally come, this is the 17th century, 16th century, the whites don't see everything they do, but what they see seems like noise. It just seems like noise. You know, all that microtonal stuff, and all of that polyphony and more, beyond polyphony, and the fact that they respond to each other while they're all singing the same lines. So you listen to them, and you know, it can sound like noise. If you're accustomed to the bel canto style, or if you are accustomed to hymn singing, where people hold a note and try to hold a note purely and make a pure chord out of it. If you want to hear an example of this kind of singing, listen to Sweet Honey in the Rock. Sweet Honey in the Rock is devoted to the preservation of rural black church singing before gospel took over. So Sweet Honey in the Rock sounds like 1940 in the rural black churches, deliberately so. But they do all of these techniques that Dr. Caldwell is talking about are on the Sweet Honey records. If you look at one called Sacred Ground in particular, it is almost an anthology. You can almost track the lecture. Okay, but what happened to Europeans was they were processing this as noise because there was just too much going on they couldn't figure out. And so they said, well, it's barbaric, it's noise, they're running, they're talking.
And Europeans, you certainly don't sing while they work.
Right, exactly. So over time, what happens is that as the slaves become Christianized, as they develop the spiritual, they acquire European-style harmony and melody and begin to be able to do it themselves while retaining all of the Africanist practices, and that produces this uniquely powerful music, which by the 1850s is beginning to be enjoyed by Europeans who think, oh my goodness. And that then accounts for the dual power of the spiritual. It is blending these two traditions. Okay, and the Europeans stop thinking of it as noise and start thinking it's music.
Sooner or later, everybody gets a clue. So one of the key things that happens when you begin to sing this music is that your brain begins to be able to focus better. And it does some very, very nice things. So it turns out that children who have had a lot of music training, they're able to focus better because they're able to separate out different kinds of noise. And you brought up a very important point yesterday. The person who is listening and listening and listening to music to the point that it shuts down. They stop being able to separate out noise. Well, what happens is that when your brain has something else take over a job, the nerves that would do something, that would go in and say, okay, now I need to be able to focus, now I need to be able to organize myself, get pruned. You're not using them, they don't need them. So when you take away the noise which you were utilizing to distract you, that's a problem because the nerves aren't there and then you have to remap them. So what happens instead is when you're singing the music and you're varying the music that you're singing and you're utilizing the music, different parts of the brain, depending on how you're speaking and how you're physically moving, how you're breathing, end up being used. The auditory information is really, really key. We talk about the medial prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobe because they're doing the filtering. And they're looking at how the information gets from point A to point B. Now, the other piece of that filtering process is the amygdala. So you have these three things that are working together in the brain, which are saying, this is extraneous noise, I don't need to do it. But it actually turns out there's also a mix in there. If you get microtonal information, that actually increases your ability to make good judgments and to discern things. So there's a caveat in that process. And that's why varying the music, and instead of using the music as noise and as a distraction, is very, very key. There is a stepwise modulation in the ability of the brain to learn, and the ability of the brain to learn the correct techniques to function well. And the more musical training that you have over the period of time, the better it works. And working memory gets stronger, focus gets stronger, and the whole frontal temporal network, this section from here forward, okay, in the brain, ends up being able to work together more cohesively, more consistently, and functions more accurately. Now, the other piece that is very, very important in this process is rhythm and how rhythm varies. We're going to talk about more in that. But there's an entrainment process that happens when you start to sing. And if you're singing and you're moving the way you would in the ring shout, your whole body is in that process. You're linking the body systems in that process. Well, that cognitive awareness and that link up of the entire body system allows kinesthetic memory to start to come into play. So you have more total body system that allows you to remember than you had before. Now that means that your brain can stuff more in, and it can respond faster because it has these linkages all over your body. And it can discern more things, and we'll talk again about that more in a minute. Those frontal lobes, those temporal lobes, the integration and the discernment process become critical in the way the body is thinking about the process and integrating working memory back into your physical tissue structure.
Oh, freedom. I have an outline that shows how these songs actually got preserved down to 2013, which is where we are. And one of the things that happened was that during the days of the Civil War, the South was losing, I mean, the North was losing, I'm sorry. The North was losing. And there was real need to add people, fighters. African Americans wanted to be in the battle. Okay? And so they were welcomed finally into the battle. And so that they're right around 1863 or so on, there was the beginning development. These songs had been being used politically, right? Up till then, as they used them to justify the anti-slavery movement, to talk about, to show how the humanity of the people. This is a musical expression that shows your humanity. But then they welcomed Africans into the soldiers grouping. And there were these regiments of Africans, and there are writings that talk about what went on within those regiments. And in